Hello, hello! Welcome back, Hallowoods audience, to another one of our weekly behind-the-scenes Q&A live streams. We return after 6 or 7 weeks off the air. We are finally back with more Hallowoods, kicking off with E179 a week or two ago, into 180 this week, and continuing on for the foreseeable future. I believe we have 20-ish episodes now left of Hello from the Hallowoods season 5 before we are through with this season. It is one of our sort of in keeping with the last season length. I think we are looking at 30 episodes in total for Hello from the Hallowoods season 5, which will buy a nice little break between sort of late summer, early fall, and then allow us to come back for season 6 on Halloween. So we are aiming for a pretty short break between seasons, as was the case this last time around. Even with the addition of this break in the middle. So that is kind of what we're looking at currently. If this is your first time on one of these Q&As, feel free to click over to the YouTube side of things. There is a chat bar. You can, in that chat bar, submit questions that you would like to see answered, and we will answer those questions in the stream, which is part of the Q&A. It is the Q, in fact, of the A. The other thing is that some people, patrons of the show, have submitted questions in the patrons ask box in advance. And so there are only 2 of those to get through today. However, hello, yeah, me in the chat. However, once we are through those 2 patron questions, then we will turn to whatever is in the YouTube chat bar. And if there's nothing in the YouTube chat bar, then we'll just make small talk about the weather until our time is up. So, welcome back. The show is back on the air, and I am thrilled. And both of the last 2 episodes have been such a blast to make. Definitely, as we get into a 5th season, the thing that has me the most excited to continue working on this show is all of the various things we can do that not break the format exactly. It doesn't always have to take the like form of a format break episode. But I really am finding a lot of stuff in this latest season that allows us to kind of push the show or do something that you haven't seen before, or focus on something that we haven't seen before. And so as we continue to sort of unfold the big yarn ball of stories that is the Hallowoods, I'm really excited for what we can continue to delve into and where we can continue to push the show in this 5th season. That was, I think, originally one of the things I was a little concerned about with making this season, which is very much a return to kind of a normal format after a very divisively format breaking a season 4, which is that I don't love returning to a format. I like doing new stuff. And so, in some ways, like I'm very happy that even though, for instance, last episode is completely the format we've been doing for 180 episodes, but the content and the direction and the stuff that we're getting to do within that is still important and still saying something new. So I'm very, very thrilled about that. So that said, the show goes on, and it will continue to be a veritable arts and craft box of various creative endeavors, as it has been for a while. But episode 179 was one of my favorites so far, for just sheer cast reasons. And it was a project that really was sort of clicking to get together until like the very last minute. And so I'm just thrilled that it kind of came out smoothly and worked out without a hitch, and we got to delve into some stuff that has been a long time coming, and stuff that I've been really planning on for a long time, finally getting to hit the audience. So that's excellent. Speaking of that episode, and I think we do I'm not sure that it's exactly spoiler territory, but be warned, we're going to talk about the casting choices for episode 179 in this question. The question comes from Lindsay, who says, "What's your question? It was so fun getting to hear some familiar VAs in the newest episode. Everyone seems to embody their role already. How did you decide who would play each role, and did you have certain people already in mind before casting?" Uh, the answer is yes. There has long been a list of like various actors that I wanted to work with, and a lot of them are in this episode. And so early on, I think as I had all these different people that I love their podcasts, uh, for Matzi over at High Nai, for Mabe De Bruin over at the Silk Verses, and for Sean Pellington over at Wake of Corrosion, who plays my podcast boyfriend in the Department of Variance of Somewhere, Ohio. I really loved working with all these people. Or had interviewed them or gotten to talk with them or had interacted with them through some other form in the podcast community. And so I really wanted to find an excuse to get all these people into the Hallowoods. Marta da Silva played my sort of played Val in the Silk Verses, and my character Chuck Harm and Val get some moments and some time together in the latter parts of the Silk Verses, very weirdly. And so I really wanted to get to work with all these people again. And so the question was definitely how to get the chance to see all these people. And the normal method for the Hallowoods would be like getting one or two people a year, and only only in like very small one-off bit parts. And so having a episode that required having so many different voices new for the show seemed like a perfect opportunity to bring in all these people that I loved and wanted to someday have on the show and get to put them all in a digital room together. And so that was a delight. So I did obviously before reaching out to each of these people, I did have a pretty good idea of which character they were going to play. That was part of the original pitch of them coming on. But it did take a little bit of shuffling around before I sent out invitations, just to kind of like figure out where everyone was going to sit on the council, um, and try and make sure that like each character had something baked into the way they were written that would hopefully appeal to that actor. Hallowoods voice parts, for the most part, are very much written for a voice actor. They are not kind of written first and then like cast afterwards. Generally, if someone comes onto the show, I know that that's who I would like in that seat, and then the character is written to be a fun character for that person. Um, and I think to date, this has worked out pretty well, because I think the one that was a little bit risky was that old Afterclaps in season two, the sort of former Auditor of Souls, who is now like a sort of furnace themed vengeance cowboy in the Midwest. uh, that was a character that I didn't know if we were going to get Steve Shell on or not. And so I wrote it with Steve Shell in mind, but then reaching out and hoping that he would be open to it. And it turns out he was. And like, I cannot thank him enough for deciding to come on that little show. And one thing that he mentioned was that he normally probably would have shied away from that a little bit, but he liked the cadence and the dialogue and the part of the character so much, that he was willing to do it. And so I'm very thankful to him for having come on to do that. But And so generally, Hallowoods guest stars are kind of kind of a little bit like in sort of a very meta way for the horror podcast genre. It is not only a way to showcase, new voice talent or fill in a character, but it's also often a way for me to show off other people in the horror podcast space that I love as people, and I want to have some little piece of them in this show, or get to share sort of in the like crossing of paths of listeners, share like their podcast with Hallowoods listeners and kind of provide a road for people who listen to this show to go and check out some of these other incredible people. And so I'm always stoked when that works out. It was incredible, frankly, that all seven of the other voice actors in episode 179 said yes to the part. We are also not a massive show. And so the ability, like for some people like Karim Kronfli, who's an amazing actor who plays Dracula in Re-Dracula, among other things. But this is a real high class fella, and normally comes with a lot of just gets paid a lot for his time, as he should. However, I appreciated that he was willing to uh, be paid a little bit less than his market rate in order to be able to appear on this show. So thank you, Kareem, for being our master of manners. It was delightful. Um, and so yeah, for this episode, I had a pretty good list of people that I had sort of lined up, and thankfully everyone said yes to these parts, and everyone brought so much more to their role than I ever could have expected of them. Um, Marta da Silva as Tolshertol, I think, just delivered such a nice presence and power and cadence in their lines. Matsu Dapple as Ethelzef, I loved. Kareem Kronfli as Ulpsalulb was just the perfect amount of blustering, terrible old manness that I was hoping for out of that role, and sort of his constant caroning about various problems. I really enjoyed, and I think a kind of surprising one was Siren Sire, because this is a fairly big personality in Hallowoods lore, and one that has a lot built up around it. Um, and so for a while, I had wondered what the kind of person that would be a good fit for this role would be, and kind of what direction to take that. Because it's one thing to hear about a character through Nick's perspective over and over and over again. But we've never seen this person on screen, and we've never heard from their perspective. So it was really interesting to try and, like provide an actual concrete voice and personality for a character that has always been kind of an off-screen, vague, big bad. Um, and so I waffled on like whether you would want someone that was kind of imposing and serious and judge-like and orderly. But that's kind of the auditor that we saw in season 4, and I think that's what the audience would have expected most of all. Um, you could go for someone who's sort of blustering and withered and old man-ish, and that would be kind of what Ulpsalulb is already. And so what I landed on was actually finding a voice part for someone from my personal life who is a very, very, very dear friend to me. But he's an old radio broadcaster, artist, sort of creative, ne'er do well, which is Rainier D. Smith. And he talks with such a kind of melodic and lilting and whimsical cadence. And I thought it would be really unexpected, but also really cool if Siren Sire is actually not just this stone cold tyrant, but in practice is actually someone who has a little bit of a sparkle in their eye and a little bit of a magnanimous nature and a little bit of a grandiose tendency to monologue, but someone who is wicked smart and someone who is socially adept and someone whose power lies not just in commanding a factory that burns all the souls in the universe, but someone who is smart enough to be able to charm and manipulate other gods into doing his bidding. And so that really clicked for me, and I loved getting to sort of sit down in recording sessions with Rainier and work through kind of the process and find kind of the right voice for this guy. Um, and so it ended up, I think, being a lot different than what the audience expected, a lot different from what Nicky Nick built up as, like, Nicky Nick's sort of vengeful vendetta. Um, and I think, it's not that Siren Sire is any less threatening than he is Nicky Nick's descriptions. He certainly does not hold back in any of the ways that make him a force to be reckoned with. But it's that he can be so pleasant while he does it, and he has the power to gaslight you that I really enjoy. So we're going to get more time with that as the seasons go on, and we're going to get to explore that relationship between them a lot more. But I think that makes him twice as dangerous to a sort of validation starved Nicky Nick as a sort of stone cold judge could ever be. And so I think that's going to be so much fun to get to dive into as time goes on. Um, just checking in on the chat a little bit, hearing the old Afterclaps monologue after Hopes was good and needed. I loved that, and I love sometimes in the Hallowoods when we get to contrast something really devastating and then have someone really sweet come on and talk to you for a little bit. Beanie says, speaking of other shows, your performance in Poe Evermore was brilliant. Thank you. I have not. That is the first comment I've seen to even mention that I was in Poe Evermore, but I really enjoyed that. Although my character may or may not have tried to murder a cat, a horrendous thing. But I did enjoy getting to play their sort of jail locked madman slash habitual liar slash disgusting drink sounds maker. Yami says, behind and Evermore, need to catch up. It's a cool project. That in itself will be a little bit of a diary of audio drama voice talent, I think. Yemi also says, I love when the character that Nick talks about is always the same when we meet them. Unreliable narrator, Nick, my beloved. Yeah. I definitely, one of the things I dig about this show is that the idea of this Rod Serling type narrator dictating everything to you, and starting off in early seasons is a very impersonal force that should be neutral, that isn't trying to push an agenda. Gradually, we learned this is a person who is trying to push a particular mysterious agenda, has strong opinions about the world, and feeds those opinions, even subconsciously, into what the audience learns. And so we have learned a lot of things through Nick and Nick that are colored by Nick and Nick's feelings on certain subjects. And so getting to explore that sort of more nuanced reality as opposed to what Nick and Nick would present is always a fun thing when we get to see a little bit outside of Nick and Nick's usual perspective. Selkie says, Siren Sire was not at all what I expected, but God, was he just fantastic, and also someone I would not talk to for very long in real life. Yami says, an HR manager type. Definitely oh man, it's so funny because the real life Rainier D. Smith is one of the kindest, warmest, most sort of conversationally charming people you'll ever meet. So getting to put him in a villain's chair has been a lot of fun for him and I both. Um, so yeah, I think that covers Lindsay's question pretty well. I will say when it comes to everybody embodying their role, I was not prepared for just how stacked full of talent every voice actor in there was, because the guidance needed for everybody was almost none. Like every single person not only kind of got the mission with the character, which is hard for I feel so bad for everyone who plays an indescribable in Hallowoods because these are characters with gibberish names who embody abstract concepts, who do not have physical descriptions, who exist only in sort of a metaphysical narrative space. And so for every single person to really clock in to their character, but then also take it over the top and really push it to the next level was delightful. I think possibly no one more than Maeve de Bruyne, who really just I had so much fun, it seems, with Strike a Scry, getting to really just do something so unhinged after such like grounded performances in the Silt verses was just incredible to see. And I hope it was as much fun for Maeve as it was for me listening to it. So I've really enjoyed this cast for that episode, and I cannot wait to have many of these folks back in sort of future appearances as time goes on. Um, let's see. I will get one last question in from the Ask box, and then I will get to some of the ones I'm seeing popping up in the chat. Feel free to drop any others in there that you would like. Oh, I see one more in here too. But this is a short one. Lizard in the weekly Q&A box asks, how is Beetle Baby doing post time skip? Or are they a Beetle teen? Um, it's a Beetle teen for sure, but we will have to check in on the Museum of Broken Promises crew eventually. But yeah, no, Beetle Baby's probably not a baby anymore. We've crossed a decade and a half. Beetle Baby's, now playing Fortnite. Beetle Fortnite. Hannah in the weekly Q&A chat asks, welcome back. Any highlights from your Hallowoods hiatus? Okay. Oh, good questions. Let's see. All right. So there's two questions baked into here. The first one, in episode 25, and this is a question I've seen echoed quite a bit, and I feel we're 4 seasons in now, so this is kind of a not exactly a spoiler for parts of season 1, but like it's so slim. It's blink and you miss it. In episode 25, who is the ghost of the woman with the broken teeth who saves Riot? Her name in my encyclopedia is just Broken Teeth. I believe she also gets a intro in one of the episode, like sort of opening intro sections. But she is more or less kind of the poster child for a demographic of Solomon's sort of horribly abused murder victims and ghosts. And so I don't think she has gotten like an actual name within the show. But she was like a retail worker before the Black Rains. She is one of Solomon's earlier victims, I think. And she represents, I think, both the kind of extent of his cruelty, but also something of the inner, I think, the inner goodness, even in these ghosts that have been put through horrible, horrible pain. And the kind of still inner slight resistance that they have. even though they are, are largely compelled to sort of do his bidding. Um, and so she doesn't show up very much in the show. She gets, I believe, freed when her fiddle is broken during the fight with one Walter Pensive. So I mean, she's there like in probably 3 or 4 appearances from like episode like 5, 6, or 7 into like episode 36 or so, and that's pretty much it. But Broken Teeth, I do have a soft spot for. She kind of reminds me in a little bit of like the way that there's a couple Xenobites that never talk or get lines, but they just like are always kind of there in the background whenever Pinhead shows up. And for a little bit, she is one of the movers and shakers for Solomon's Ghost Legion. But yeah, she is, I think, also she is also possibly mentioned a little bit later in season 4 when Ben Alder discusses a childhood experience that he had where they found a body in the woods of one of Solomon's victims. And so I think that's Broken Teeth. Um, as really for Solomon, there's only a very small percentage of the body that needs to be made into an instrument. The rest can kind of be disposed of. And so that is, I think that's pretty much from A to Z all I have on Broken Teeth. But I have seen a couple comments out there being like, who was this person? Was she meant to be like more of a big character? Was this like a dropped thread? She's out there. She's done. She might be in the she might be up with the Grackle. I don't know. But she got her piece a little bit. Although in the same breath that Walter Pensive did. The second question, this is a trickier one because I think the answer I'm about to give is correct, but I cannot verify that it is. But the question is, did Dex and Zelda adopt Jonah? And if so, does he have Covenant blood? I believe the answer is no, but I believe Jonah was Dex's son. And so I believe when Zelda and Dex got married, he was not Zelda's biological son, but he came in under that. I think that is the case because I think in the very like first episode is mentioned that Jonah is her stepson, which I think that's right, but that's the Duckworth family tree is tricky because I believe Dex takes Zelda's last name in that marriage in order to like keep the timeline clean. And so I believe that's how it's set up. But don't wiki that if it contradicts something else that's already. But Jonah does not, I believe, have Covenant blood. I think he's a normal dude up until he opens one of Merylmar's 3 gates and becomes the third herald of the age. Yami in the chat says, I love that Dex took her name. I don't see Zelda taking anyone else's name. I think she's proud to be a Duckworth. And so I think that would have been one of the riders of that marriage, is how I rationalize that. So I think that's probably the case. But that said, that does bring us through the list of patrons ask bot questions. So let me check the chat, answer any questions in there. Feel free to drop them in. Now's the time. Yami, very back at the top, says no questions. But as I said, I loved 180 so much. The Pet Shop Boys reference made me so happy. It was a it was a busy nightclub in Montreal and a nearly spiritual moment to be surrounded by a song I had never heard before, which was "Go West" by the Pet Shop Boys, and the way it carried through that gyrating crowd was transcended. I cherish the memory fondly, and I was thrilled to get to sneak in a little bit of it into both the backstories of sort of two separate characters in this latest episode. Scrolling through, let's see. The Selkie says the Kareem Kronfli jump scare in 179 was such a delight. Stacked cast for sure. There's a couple of voice actors that are famed for their jump scares at this point, or just show up in so many different shows that they kind of have gained reputation for it. Apparently, Kareem Kronfli is one of those folks, as is David Alt, who we have not had on the show, as is Harlan Guthrie, who is our Dashiell Spade. And so that has been a blast for sure. We have yet to ever break our rule of sort of only having one, myself aside, only having one role per guest actor. And so, for us, Harlan Guthrie is our Dashiell Spades, and so I need to find excuses to get more Dashiell in there. But the problem also with the Hallowoods narrative is that I cannot always just insert guest appearances because there's a somewhat rigid list of reasons someone's voice could be heard on the air. One of those is that you have the power to speak and dream, which is Nick Nick. It's also Lady Ethel Mallory through her dreaming broadcast tech at Botco. Um, there is a Let's see. There is a mysterious artifact that is a yellow tape recorder, and that also has the power to broadcast in Dream on the things that are recorded on it. And so that has passed hands several times between Horace Loveland from A Writer Out of Time and from My Love from the Moormire, two Beatles, if you're a nerd. And then it has passed to Lawrence Abbott at Downing Hill, from which we get the sort of Downing Hill live stream that we did. Old Bindings, that was it. And then that has passed from Lawrence to Other Riot / Clementine, which is how we get a bunch of recordings in season 4. And after that, it has passed hands again. But so other than those 3 devices, there's not, and I guess other people that Nick interviews or talks to while he is more or less recording. And Danielle can speak in Dream. So there's only like really stuff that interjects into Dream in canon is the only way to get voices on the show. And so there is then a challenge of like, well, only people that are like talking to Nick or Lady Ethel or recording on a tape recorder can really be like guest parts. So I'm always trying to find ways to bend around that to get to more people that we like on the show. But it is also the format that allows me to do this one-handed most of the time. Let's see. Scrolling through. Yes, Yami says, okay, I do have a question. For 179, was it a group recording or asynchronous? It was definitely not a group recording, because frankly, trying to get schedules lined up for 8 people would have been a little tricky. So it was more a case of meeting one-on-one for half the cast and kind of guiding them through and doing like a directed recording session. And then for some actors, they just recorded asynchronously, sent their lines in, and that was that. And so it's a sort of the equivalent of movie magic to merge lines from all these people into one conversation. But it is something that like I continue to kind of get experience working on as well. Um, and there's a certain thing I'm always shooting for when directing that sort of thing, which is trying to make sure the tone is correct, trying to make sure the match is correct, trying to make sure everything will seem like it's part of the bigger whole. Cannot comment on how that turned out. That's for you to judge. But I did have a lot of fun trying to orchestrate this many people into one scene, which I know other shows with full casts do all the time. But for the Hallowoods, it's a unique prospect. So it was definitely fun to get to work on. Beanie says, not gonna lie, I was half expecting David Alt to voice Siren Sire. I really, yeah, I do need to find a good home for David Alt in the show, as it would be a crime to let the whole thing pass without having him on it. That is true for a couple of other major podcast voice actors as well. There's definitely a reserve list of people I would love to have on the show, but have to either wait for the right character or the right time, and then hope that they're willing to partake in that as well. But I think then with all of our questions through, I believe that is over. I believe that is it for our Q&A. So Hallowoods is back. We are carrying on. Probably only other stuff would be. Um, Yemi says, I know I joke that I'd love to voice an ex-therapist, but I think David would be a good therapist. I think he would. Nicky Nick really needs someone to talk to that isn't sort of the captive human audience that is sort of somewhat endangered by his continued interactions with them. Um, yeah, I think the only other things would be for the Hallowoods news this week. We are going to get our merch train back on the road. There's been a bit of a break over this 6 weeks period of moving and logistics. But coming up in a while, I would like roughly once a month, sort of new Hallowoods merch to be making its way out now that we have a wonderful partnership with DFTBA. Don't forget to be awesome. So we will definitely be leveraging that as time goes on. And maybe seeing about doing some fun partnerships with certain cool artists that I know. On top of that, our Halloween's, or not Halloween's, our Valentine's collection, More Love from the Moormire, is now out. That is free for show patrons. It is, I think, $3.99 for not show patrons, but being a patron for a month is $5, and then you get 180 bonus drapples as well. So that's probably the economical way to go. But More Love for the Moormire is a collection of 5 bad Valentine's cards and 4 short Hallowwood stories. Every Moormire collection is set in the period between seasons 3 and seasons 4. And so we will continue to flesh that out a little bit through those. But they are very silly. They are little cute stories or bits of poetry or things I think sound cute. So that's why those exist. But we will go forward with those. There are now 2 more Meyer collections out, and I'm sure we'll make it a Valentine's tradition for next year. People did seem to enjoy this one, which I'm thrilled about, and I was very happy to check in on some of the characters that we got to mention in that who have not had the luxury of showing up again in season 5 yet. But for certain characters, the reason I'm really happy for the Moormire like little interim collections existing is that you can it's a nice opportunity to check in on some people and do some story moments that otherwise fall between that very dramatic time skip period. And so with that in mind, like there are characters that we're going to meet again in the show that we haven't returned to yet. It's seasons 4 and the bit of season 5 that we're into. But at the same time, it is nice to get to sort of check in on a couple of important things that happen in the interim, so that if anything, we just get to see that between where they were in season 3 and where they will be when we check in on them again in the main show as proper. Beanie says, any particular updates on book? Yes, book is booking or trying to get booked. The book is in the process of shopping around to various publishers and seeing if they like it. The problem is that I'm also filled with ideas on how to better book in it. And so largely the state of the book is that if it doesn't sort of find a home within probably the next 1 to 2 months, then I will rewrite the whole thing, but better, and sort of take it to another draft, which I've had a lot of ideas for how it could be. This is the problem with works that I mean, this is the problem with old writing. Old Hallowoods writing is set in stone more or less, and I can't change it or fix it once it's out. So it is always written in ink, and then I have to just work forward from whatever past me has decided to write. For the book, it has been so long since starting this book versus where we are currently that I'm looking at writing at ideas that I had 5 years ago. And so with the book, if it finds a home in its current state, it's good, and I will be happy. But if it doesn't find a home in the next little while, then probably I will overhaul it again. And I think it'll be a little bit just more streamlined or more dynamic or more interesting as a result. But if it goes out and finds a spot in its current form, I'm completely content with that, and I can work on writing a second book instead, which is the hope. I have at this point, a good 2 to 3 books I need to write after this one in the backlog. So once we are ahead on Hallowoods a little bit, I want to get probably 3 or 4 episodes in the bank. But after we are ahead on Hallowoods, then writing the next book, whether it's another version of 100 Eyes in the Dark or whether it is a sort of the next book in the roster, that will be the project for this year. So there should be another book done, or there should be a book done by the time this year is done. But I'm definitely hoping to ideally have a book locked in pre-orders ready to publish by the end of this year. So that is one of the although anyone in the Hallowoods audience has heard that for several years, but that is kind of the main driver for this year. On top of all the other cool stuff I'm doing right now, which is a lot. But on top of that, I will give a shout out as well. The little venture I've been doing on the side, which is running Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, has been so much fun. Both of the groups I have for that are delightful people. And so our Sunday nights campaign of Vecna Eve of Ruin remains fully booked. Our Tuesday nights opening for Out of the Abyss does have some open seats, so we'll be hoping to get at least one other person in there sometime in the next couple of weeks. And then lastly, we'll probably open up for a third campaign relatively soon. I think it would be a lot of fun to do a Curse of Strahd vampire run, given the other projects that work on. So that is probably something that we'll see in the near future as well. But that is largely it from this corner for now. So I cannot wait to continue drumming forward on the Hallowoods. There was a lot of big packing stuff in the plot in this last episode, and we might have a little bit of a breather in next week's episode to sort of pace out from that or provide some decompression time from one of our heaviest episodes yet. So it might be lighter fare this episode and then a return to the big machinations of the plot the week after. but we're back on the air, so it's a rolling process. But I think that'll about wrap it up for today, everybody. So thank you so much for coming out to our Q&As. Thank you for dropping questions, both in the patrons ask box and the chat. Lovely to see you all. And I think we will tune in next week for another Q&A after this. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. See ya. Toodles!